Full Contact. In association with Mitsubishi Motors, drive your ambition.
Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph and Mitsubishi Motors. Well, after only a 231-day hiatus, the 2020 Six Nations is back. Ireland and Italy completed round 4 of the fixtures, and this weekend we will see 3 teams battle it out to be crowned champions a mere 7 months after the tournament was suspended due to the coronavirus pandemic. England's preparations for the final clash with Italy were dealt a blow after their warm-up game with the Barbarians was called off following a breach, well, several breaches of lockdown regulations by a string of Ba Baa's players. We'll be discussing the impact of the cancellation and what it could mean for Eddie Jones' squad as they attempt to lift the Six Nations this weekend. England's women have already secured back-to-back Six Nations titles without having to kick a ball. The draw between France and Scotland on Wednesday was enough to secure a second successive title for the Red Roses, and we'll be speaking to Captain Sarah Hunter about the prospect of it making it 2 Grand Slams in a row this weekend when they take on Italy. Oh, what a year it's been for Exeter Chiefs. They followed up their Champions Cup victory with a Gallagher Premiership final win over Wasps on Sunday. Director of Rugby Rob Baxter will join us to reflect on what's been an unforgettable year, both on and off the pitch, and to talk about what's next for himself, his club, and, well, what's next for rugby as we head into an uncertain new year. Well, as ever, we'll be answering your questions as well, and we'll be taking a closer look at some of the work being done at grassroots level during the last 6 months as part of the Mitsubishi Volunteer Recognition Programme. Alongside me today is the former England, Newcastle and Toulon centre, Tom May. Hello, Tom.
Hi, how are we doing?
Good to be back, isn't it?
Very good
to be back.
Strange times, but all the same.
Strange times. 7 months since we've seen international rugby. What do you make of, in general, of the return of the domestic and European club competitions?
It's pretty hot and cold, isn't it? There's been some teams that have seemed to have thrived since.
Well, Wasps especially.
Exactly. But then on the flip side of that, take someone like Northampton. What does it mean to play in front of fans? Well, you can probably ask them and say it means a lot to us as a club, as a team. I think it's. Do you know what? Take away the performances. It's just been good to have rugby back and to be able to focus on something different.
Yep.
I think from a performance perspective, from a coaching perspective, probably the coaches have thought, do you know what, that break really caused us some issues, and to get back to the games and hit the ground running, I think was difficult for some teams.
I'll tell you what's interesting, because Stuart Hooper at Bath said quite unashamedly, look, one of the things we think with Northampton are doing are trying to play a game which they were majoring in 7 months ago. It was quite an intricate game, and they got that off pat. To come back after such a long break and expect to do that straight away is very difficult. And we have said no, we're going to be a bit more direct. We've got a very good fly half who kicks his goals, kicks into position, and we're going to prosper on that. Having said that, Wasps' game was fairly involved, wasn't it? And they came out completely contrary to the Saints and managed to make that work. So I understand that theory in one way, but it seems to have been supported in one sense and then refuted, when you look at another example.
I think it shows the difference of getting those early wins.
Yeah.
When you make a couple of losses and you're then on the back foot and you start looking for different things to try and drag you through and get you through, that's probably where Saints start to look to the fans, right? We need this extra lift. And they didn't get that. And it just compounded itself, didn't it? And on the totally opposite scale, Wasps completely cleaned up.
Well, Tim, one of the problems I had with the way that the government's approached this is I was at the first event that had a crowd at the Stoop. When there was social distance, there were about 3,000 people there. And it wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. And it was better for the players to have live contributions there. And you could feel that there was a difference, even with a fifth of the crowd in. And what I don't understand is, speaking to the people at Quins, I am aware that they followed up all the leads because they had all people's addresses and so on. and they didn't report anything of a spike at all. So rather than just assuming that sport, under any circumstances, would result in extra things, if they'd looked at this and said, wait a minute, well, this has been done like this and we've no evidence of that, why don't we follow that through? Rather than just saying a blanket ban and nobody's allowed to carry on with these things. That doesn't make sense to me.
Completely agree. I've been to 2 or 3 stadiums, one of which was Allianz Park and the other was Franklin's Gardens. And there is no way you can't get fans in there without them being socially distanced.
Yeah.
They're that big. They've got fan villages that they can use. They can use the different space. And it would make a massive amount of financial impact on those clubs in a time right now where we're looking...
Well, at least 4 CEOs have told me it's a difference. If they can get that break even of, say, a fifth or to a quarter in, they might survive. If it goes a whole season without it, a lot of them are looking at a bankruptcy.
Well, and I think what the frustration is, there's 4 events in the O2 which are packed out.
Yeah.
Therein lies another story, though. We're digressing.
Anyway, going to COVID breaking regulations, what about the Ba Baa's players? Now, there were two schools of thought on this. And some people went over the top and said, hang, draw, quarter them. But on the other hand, some people on social media were saying, oh, it doesn't matter, for God's sake, lads will be lads. Now, I can't subscribe to that. I'll tell you why in a minute, but what's your view on it?
I sit firmly in the middle in that you cannot do that. You need to understand, the privilege of playing for the Barbarians and the opportunity that presents itself.
And the fact that you signed a contract and were taking money for it.
Yeah.
Therefore, you are bound by certain conditions.
Yeah. I would imagine that coronavirus was mentioned on that contract
I would
as well.
have thought so, yeah.
But then also... the way some of them were torn to shreds, I was a bit like, whoa, you can't just hang people out like that and talk about them. These fellas, everyone's made mistakes in big scenarios. These guys will know exactly the mistakes they've made. Especially people like Rob Shaw.
Well, the irony, Rob Shaw being a former England captain, what this has done is meant that England, unlike the other 2 people going for the title, Ireland and France, won't have a warm-up game.
So
that really is not good.
Yeah, and he's cost his... In a time when he's not playing for his country, he's cost his country.
Yeah.
I think also perhaps the guys that were let go by Eddie Jones for an opportunity to be involved.
Yeah.
I mean, early on in your career, Eddie Jones is probably not someone you want to be causing disciplinary issues with. No,
so I as I say, I am stridently in the middle ground like you are. I don't believe they deserve to be pilloried in personal ways, but they should have realised that, say for example at Twickenham, the RFU's lost £1 million over this. £1 million that could have been spent in the grassroots game. That could be the difference between junior clubs going under and not. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And hundreds of people have been working on protocols, not just for the broadcast of the BBC. So I got the call sheets. They involved 80, 90 people, hundreds of hours of work. I know at Twickenham, thousands of hours of work trying to plan the social distancing rules. Can you imagine how complicated that is to try and, accommodate people and so on? And so they should have understood that this work was going on. And in fact, if they'd have thought about it, they would have done. And they should have done nothing to... What I don't understand, when you look at what they did, what did they do there that they couldn't have done in the hotel bar?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, it's really weird.
You want to play drinking games? Absolutely no problem. It's a Tuesday. It's miles from the game. I understand that. But, you can have but in fact, it'd be free probably in the hotel.
Save your money.
Anyway, let's move on. On the pitch, England can win the Six Nations this weekend. I would think they're probably still just about favourites because obviously Ireland and France are playing each other. They both can't win. So... England, you have to get a bonus point. It's perfectly doable. But how do you think... Jones has his own way of motivating players. What do you think they will be able to do? How effective do you think they'll be being able to be without that game going into a live game?
I think clearly they would have preferred to have had a hit out and get their bodies physically prepared. Some of them haven't had games for a good while. But actually, I think the way that Eddie Jones prepares his men, the mindset within a lot of those guys to train at test level when they're in camp, I think they'll come out of it all right. And actually, against Italy, they've probably got a chance to
they need to win by 24 points if it comes down to points difference. Now, I mean, I hitherto would have always been very suspicious that you can't really replicate stuff in camp. But I've seen Jones's squads come out of camp only and go into games, big games, and be right on the mark straight away. Yeah, I've seen him do it the other way. So it is possible. It just depends. It's been quite a long time. What are they going to do you think, out half? When Farrell not play for 2 months, George Ford was due to miss the Barbarians game, with it not presumably he'll be up there or thereabouts now.
I would think, given that Manu's not there, both of those would be involved. Yeah. Which is why he probably didn't start, because he had the knock, in inverted commas. Mm-hmm. He just said, right, we'll get you out. I'll put Owen Farrell at 12. I'll probably have Henry Slade at 13. Yeah. I think it probably doesn't have exactly the right balance, because you would like to have a ball carrier in there. And there's talk, isn't there, of someone like Ollie Lawrence being able to step in and mirror what Manu does, but I'm not sure that's
against Italy, possibly the one team in the Six Nations where that ball carrying threat, you can cover it up, be better because you've got other weapons around you. I don't have any doubt that they'll go over there and win. I mean, simply because Italy's record recently, it has been awful.
It's terrible.
It's terrible. It's just a question of whether they go in undercooked. Let's turn our attention to the Women's Six Nations. And congratulations, England's women have secured another Six Nations without even playing. I'm very pleased to say that I can speak now to Sarah Hunter, the England women's captain. Hello, Sarah. How did it feel winning a title without having to play for several months?
It's a very strange time that we're in generally, to be sitting on the sofa watching the France-Scotland game and then not to quite realise at that time, but to look on your phone a bit later and see via social media that we've won the...
Hold on, you say you didn't register? You weren't...
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I hadn't even done the maths. We've been so focused on going to Italy next week and to winning the Six Nations there that I didn't even think about the different permutations about results that happened this weekend that we could have possibly won it. So it was a bit strange.
So when your clubmate Helen Nelson nailed that touchline conversion and sealed the draw for Scotland, you weren't out there thanking us immediately afterwards and texting or jumping? No?
I had no idea. I was really pleased for them, the performance the Scottish girls put in, and more so that obviously we've got really close ties with Helen and Rachel Malcolm and Leah Bartlett and obviously Sarah Bonner, who used to be at Lightning, and I was so pleased in terms of the performance they put in, and you like you said, that kick by Helen, we come to expect that from what we see week in, week out, but for her to go and do it in a pressure game like that was brilliant, and I was probably more pleased with them with that. Like I say, I had absolutely no idea, so there was messages going to say well done, great performance, great result, but it didn't twig until we saw it come through on social media that we'd actually got the victory, because like I said, our focus had purely been on next weekend, not anything about the results from this weekend. So yeah, it's a bit surreal way to win a Six Nations sat on your sofa.
Sarah, given the amount of focus that you talk about you had coming into this fixture, so the fact that you've now won it, does that affect your mental state? Does that affect your preparation moving through this week?
No, not at all. I think it shows just where the team are in terms of, obviously we wanted to win the Six Nations when we set out, and we wanted to do that by winning every game, and nothing's changed. Obviously we've had that long break since we last played Wales back in March we knew that when we got the go ahead to play this game against Italy, that actually that's where our focus reverted to, that we want to go there, we want to finish the tournament off like we set out, and that was to win. So in the last few weeks, when we've come back into camp, that's always been our focus, our preparation in terms of how we get ourselves in the best place to go to Italy and to win that Grand Slam and back up the Grand Slam from 2019 as well.
So you've had a very eclectic career. I mean, you've won so much, but this is the first time, and hopefully it'll be the last time, that you've had to lift a trophy in an empty stadium. How have you found the return to rugby in general?
Yeah, it's certainly been rather strange playing without crowds. I think over the years that I've been involved, even at our club level, we've grown to get crowds on a Saturday afternoon, and obviously at international level, we've gone from probably having a couple of hundred to having tens of thousands of people come to watch the game. So no doubt it will be a bit surreal next weekend, or this weekend, I should say. But I think it's the situation that we found ourselves in. Nothing's normal anymore, is it, over the last sort of 7 months. So I think we've grown to get used to doing things a little bit differently. And although it will be, our friends, our family won't be there, the supporters that have grown to travel around the world to watch us play as England fans, it'll be sad to not have them there. But I know that obviously lifting that trophy will try and show what we mean to sort of say thank you to all those friends and families that support us throughout. And the pandemic's been a really challenging time for everyone, and I guess for sports people included, in terms of it's changed our lifestyle quite significantly. But obviously we're now fortunate to be back in a position and doing our job that we so badly love and want to do, and that's not quite the same for everyone else. So I think there'll be a little bit of reflection on, yes, there's an empty stadium, but there's a reason there's an empty stadium, and that's to hopefully help with getting us through this pandemic and over the sort of final hurdle to getting back to a normal world. And for that, we're thankful that we can get to do that and recognise that not everyone's in that position to do that anymore.
Wise words, Sarah. Congratulations on the win. Let's make sure that you go out in your own style the way you want to. So good luck over the weekend.
Thank you very much. We'll do our best.
Now, let's say it loudly. European champions, Gallagher Premiership champions. It's Exeter Chiefs in the space of a week, and I'm really, really happy to say we can speak to the man who's at the helm of all this, Rob Baxter, Exeter's Director of Rugby. Rob, hello, and how are you feeling? How do you sum all that up?
Yeah, it's been an interesting week. I mean, I'll be honest with you, the easiest way to sum it up probably is now, once we got that final whistle went on Saturday, was, as I said, after again, probably a little bit of relief, based on, I don't know, it sounds a little bit strange, but almost having to have everything pent up and on hold.
Yeah.
Over all the good things that happened in that number of weeks. Beating Toulouse in the Heineken Cup semi-final was a huge game for us, and then we had a tough Premiership semi-final, and then obviously the racing game was incredible how it went down to the wire and the way it did. And then the similar thing happened the week after, with us, looking like 5 minutes of the game left, and there was a chance of Wasps kind of killer sucker punching us, I suppose, a bit really, with a 5 metre line out. But we've come through it all, and as I said after the game, it felt a little bit like we could actually stop then and enjoy things and appreciate what we'd gone through, because everyone knows in sport actually appreciating the wins and appreciating the journey and is very important, because it goes by so quickly, your sporting career. But in the current climate, especially around the testing regime that you had to get through every week to be allowed to play the next game, things certainly felt like they've been on hold, and we could actually kind of semi-let our hair down because we had a 4-hour bus trip back from Twickenham. So we actually had the opportunity to stop and enjoy what we'd achieved. So it was a nice way to finish the season, definitely.
How hard is that, Rob, on the back of the Champions Cup final? Because you're desperate to celebrate that win, but you've also got to sort of dampen those celebrations down, knowing that you've got a ticking clock to the next week. How difficult was that?
I think that was in some ways the biggest challenge, because especially over the last few years, you've probably seen teams winning the Heineken Cup and having really big celebrations and almost going on for 2 or 3 days, and everyone kind of buys into it, and that's kind of almost what's expected by the lads now. They're kind of part of the reason to get to those games and to have those experiences is also those experiences post game and how you can celebrate together and enjoy those moments, and that's obviously been totally different. So I mean, to be fair, after after the Heineken Cup final, I'd stayed in the changing rooms at Bristol for quite a while. I have to say, the staff, everyone at Bristol was fantastic, brilliant with the players and with us, and kind of did make it feel like it was a home game in a lot of ways, which was great. So they weren't in any rush to get the lads out and moved on. They let them really have a bit of time there, and I think that was important because we couldn't really spend time anywhere else. We only had a short bus trip home, and then obviously by the time we got home, everything shut down. So it was nice. It was nice for that time in the changing room. But as I said, I think that's part of the reason why we still had that kind of emotional release that needed to get through the following week. Because the reality is, the lads couldn't do that much on the Sunday because they had to pass a COVID test on Tuesday morning, and everyone's been very aware that actually, however we want to look at it, it's not so much the illness that's stopping rugby players because of the ones we've encountered, no one's actually become ill. It's that passing of the test. Because the passing of the test just puts you out of the next game. And your last 4 or 5 games of the season, as big as our games were, that's quite a pressure cooker that can build up over that month to 6 weeks. And that's certainly something that has been a different challenge and an interesting challenge in a lot of ways.
Robert, across the pandemic, there's been so much comment across sport about how everything's really difficult. It's tough to get through. Obviously, all the testing protocols, everything's out of kilter. Is this pandemic allowed you as a coach to do anything that you perhaps haven't been able to do in regular times? Is there any positives from a coaching perspective?
I think obviously you can't run away from the one big positive, which was the extended break, because players genuinely had a time away from the game there that most successful players won't have at any other time in their career, because the only other time you'll get that length of break away from rugby is if you have a pretty severe injury. And as you know now, if you have a severe injury that could be a 6, 9 month, 12-month injury, you're pretty much actually in more time than the players, because full-time rehab days now are kind of 7 in the morning till 5:30 at night. And so actually you don't have that time away where you have to take individual responsibility. Where we were fortunate or where we've done it right was the group of players took a massive amount of individual responsibility around maintaining their individual programs, and that allowed us then with the stage 1 process, which was purely non-rugby specific. It wasn't about balls, and it wasn't about team playing, it wasn't about interaction with other players. When we first came back, the lads came back in very, very good condition, and that allowed us to work very hard in that stage 1 process, which was pure, gym work and pure running. And I think we did get some gains there that would probably be impossible to get in any other scenario, because you just haven't got the time to take that long to get into rugby. So I think that would be the one thing. If you're asking about rugby specific things, if I'm 100% honest with you, the decision we made was to look at our strengths becoming bigger strengths. So we actually said in the period that we'd have back playing, which was only like a 10-week period in total from us getting back in till the last game, we said actually, we should be really trying to introduce too much new and fresh. We took the decision not to, and it worked out very well for us, just to really drive our strengths. And I know for a fact some other Premiership teams really looked at an awful lot of things, and that kind of messed them up, because you just didn't get the time to establish them without getting under pressure on the league table. So we kind of looked, I think, more physically and freshness and emotionally fresh, and recharging those batteries was the biggest thing. And then the flip side of that, the emotional challenge once you got back in, is not having crowds and not having people there and not having the things in the background that can kind of help you along and create those special sporting occasions. So, we recharged the batteries one way, and then it was a good job we did, because I think the season on a whole has been quite an emotionally draining season, because there hasn't been anybody there to share it with.
That's a point I just want to pick up on. You, fortunately, have tangentially raised it. When knowing team sports, the vicarious pleasure you get out of winning, not your own, but your teammates and so on, knowing the sort of club Exeter are within the community, how difficult has it been when you haven't been able to fully share it with people who've been on this long, long journey as supporters, many of whom you'll know intimately?
Yes, it's been very difficult, and I think people have probably underestimated how hard it's been for them. And always round, I think, I know some people get a bit, I don't know, a bit afraid or that they don't like talking about the emotional side of things. And we haven't got a problem at Exeter Chiefs, and we never have done. We've talked about it a lot with the players, and I think probably the biggest description or the biggest guide or the biggest time that you really saw how important emotion is around sport was probably when we won the Heineken Cup, and you saw so many players on phones in tears. And I know for a fact, it doesn't matter how big that game would have been, if their families had been there and they could have just gone over to the side of the pitch and had a hug and, started talking about the game, there wouldn't have been that many tears. There'd have been lots of smiles, there'd have been lots of enjoyment, but the emotion was so different without those, loved ones and people you care about and the people who've kind of been on this journey with you. It was an incredible thing to watch. And, and I think that probably signifies more than anything else what that bond can be like. And similarly, I had loads of phone calls and texts and emails from people literally, and the first thing they were saying was they were all sat around watching TV crying.
Do you in any way feel cheated a little bit? Not down to anyone's, malevolence, but, circumstances cheated you from what should have been a more fulsome experience, an even better experience? Oh,
100%. I mean, I don't think anybody would turn around and say that they wouldn't have preferred there to be big, huge crowds there, and you really feel that the whole build up to the game, because it is different. It is very odd being in a huge stadium just before the biggest game in the European calendar, and it being quiet and there being nobody there. You can't. It's very hard to describe. It's once the game starts, the emotions of watching it, I suppose, from a coaching perspective, they're just as gut churning and they're just as worrying. They're just concerning, and those emotions in the actual game itself, technically and tactically, doesn't really change. But the whole build up and the post game and how you feel the crowd reacting to the momentum and the flow of the game, it's so different that it's almost changed the sport in a lot of ways. And it's certainly something that obviously everyone is involved in all levels of sport, but especially everyone involved in rugby at the moment with the financial unpredictability. We've just got to be desperate that we can get whatever we can back and going and start a process. I think the big thing for us is, or becoming for me, is it feels a little concerning that we feel so far off wanting to start the process of moving things along. And when you look at how big groups of people are going to be allowed to be in the near future, I believe there's an event at the O2 relatively soon with several thousand people. Actually, the logistics of some of these big stadiums of getting thousands of people in are pretty simple. And it worries me a little bit that we're not taking some, even if they're cautious, but some first steps to start getting the process back on track.
Well, it would help if those who are going to do it actually paid attention to them. I won't ask you from the Barbarians. A fan question before you go. From an Exeter fan, Doug. Robbie said, how do you now evolve this squad to ensure long-term success? We have a number of key members who are at the end of their playing careers.
I think the reality of the season will actually be a driver for us because, some people probably still aren't aware because they haven't really probably studied the rugby calendar. But when we start in 3 or 4 weeks' time, every single weekend is either a Premiership game or a Heineken Cup weekend. First 3 rounds of the Premiership clash with 3 international fixtures. So as ourselves, as with some other clubs, we'll have probably 6, 7, 8 people away, plus a couple of guys who've been off operations. Probably pretty much gets to 10 players from the 23 that played in the Cup finals, probably unavailable for at least those first 3 rounds. So that in itself means there's at least 10 more players who've kind of been on the fringe of that group will have to come in and have to play well enough to win games of Premiership rugby for us to have a season we can call as a follow-on season to this season. So the evolution will probably happen a little bit, almost because we're forced to do it. And I don't mind saying, I've probably got a few players who have been a little bit ginger this morning after having a weekend of celebrations, who in the next day or two are going to get a bit of a rude awakening from me over phone calls, because some of the lads haven't played rugby for 3 or 4 weeks now, maybe longer. And they're going to be guys who are going to expect to play on day one. Well, they can't have a week and a half pre-season and expect to really perform in a Premiership game. Some of those guys are going to have to realise their physical preparation needs to start pretty quickly if they're going to want to play in like 3 or 4 weeks' time. Because the reality is, this would be a short pre-season if we started now. And we're not starting for 2.5 weeks. So we've got to get a reality around what we're expecting from each other and what we're going to expect from this group and how we're going to move ourselves forward with those experiences. Because if we do it right, we'll automatically evolve the squad because of the pressures of having to play. If we get it wrong, then you can see how you can make a season a right battle for yourself. And And let's not remember, when we get back out of these 3 games, I think there's only 3 for the 7 weekends, 4 Heineken Cup games, 3 Premiership games, and we're back into the Six Nations, which is going to be, again, all clashed with Premiership games for 7 or 8 weekends. So the challenges on squads this season in themselves, if we do it right, should develop us as a club and should help us, drive the squad to another level.
Final question, if you don't mind, Rob. A lot of speculation has been made, and it's been put to you several times about the England job. I'm not going to ask you to nail it down one way or another. I just wondered about this. Do you think the sort of preparation you've had at Exeter is sufficient for a national job? Or do you think there's something else you need to add on to your CV?
No, I don't. I think so. I think that the challenges of coaching in the Premiership are bigger than people think, and I think probably what people don't understand is how much world rugby, when you're involved in recruiting, building a squad, running a salary cap, all the things that are there, and all the challenges around the infrastructure, the coaching group you want around you, your conditioning, how you run your conditioning staff, same with your medical staff. Those challenges are kind of no different. And I think what people sometimes underestimate is that you literally watch game after game after game after game of rugby, whether it be international, Super Rugby, all the different leagues, because the recruitment process never stops. And because there's always an ongoing scenario, where does your squad sit? What's kind of developing through from the young players? Where do you going to need to add quality? And then where are those quality players? When are they available? What games do you need to watch to see them? You see so much of rugby, I think people probably underestimate that you're actually kind of at the forefront of everything that's happening all the time. There isn't many people who are in these top jobs in the Premiership. And that's not just directors of rugby. I'm talking about head coaches and the frontline coaches, so guys like Ali Heaper and Rob Hunter at Exeter. You're massively experienced in all of that, all of the time. And I do understand people saying there's a difference when you have to bring a group together over a shorter period of time. Of course, there's challenge in everything. But that's no different to throwing a challenge to someone who says you've got a week and a half pre-season and you might have half your squad missing. Is that such a different challenge to guys coming together for the first time? I mean, there's going to be periods this season where the England group are together longer than the Exeter Chiefs group are together. I don't think we'll ever have our players together as a whole squad as long as England are going to have them through the Six Nations period. So, what's the more challenging one? Do you see what I mean? I think people underestimate all those things when they actually look at the challenges between the two. Are they different? Of course they're different. Are the people who do the jobs different? I think they are. But that doesn't mean that one challenge doesn't prepare you for the next one.
Good points, well made. Rob, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Congratulations again from everyone here on your successes. Long may they continue. And let's hope that someone listens when we comes to the safeguarding of rugby's future in general. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Tom.
Cheers. Level-headed, emotional to the right extent. A very impressive man. Very impressive man, isn't he?
Yeah, great to chat to. And I think when you listen to someone like that, there's always something going on in the background that provides a solid argument to everything he does.
Yep.
And you can see why, when you've got a level-headed coach like that understands players, that understands emotions, why they're doing so well.
Well, let's go into the Six Nations preview, or the end weekend. Look, Ireland and Italy, they resumed in typical fashion. I think Ireland did the job. They might have wanted it to go a bit better, but they got the expected bonus point win. But they were looked across when France was smacking Wales and thought, actually, that's not easy. Not easy. France playing well. Dupont, tremendous at the moment. I mean, it's amazing. The two Racing scrum halves, who were both good players, can't even get in the squad.
No, he's actually sewn that position up as well, isn't there?
At the moment, yes.
He's penned in every week. Listen, I think the game at the weekend when France were playing, Wales allowed Dupont far too much time in and around that breakdown to start managing the game, and that's one area that Ireland will definitely focus on. Is shutting him down, shutting down Ntamak. Because if they both get armchair rides, they'll tear you to shreds. Yeah. Do you know what? I think France might do a job on Ireland. I think.
England, as we said before, they need 24 points if it comes down to points difference. And if you're a betting man, you probably put the money on that because I think they'll do that. What about Wales? 4 defeats in a row now for Wayne Pivac, and it's far too soon to start pressing eject buttons and calling for heads. But there've been atypical Welsh performances in this sense. Wales used to be very difficult to score against, and that isn't proving to be as difficult as it used to be.
Especially when your defence goes to the team that you played against at the weekend. Look, I think whenever a coach leaves, especially someone of the quality of Shaun Edwards, there is always an element that the next coach in is going to try and make his stamp on the team. And new systems, little tweaks to whatever system they're trying to employ, take time.
Yep.
And the way that those messages are conveyed come from Shaun Edwards in a certain way.
Yep.
And they'll be coming from Byron Hayward in another way. But whatever it is at the moment, it's taking some time to bed in. And you just think, I don't know, the French, they sort of beat Wales up a bit, didn't they, really? Yeah. And I think Wales have really got to try and dig deep and try and find a way quickly to establish what it is that's what are they about as a team.
Well, Scotland, it'd be interesting to see Finn Russell. He's back. Mercurial. Finn Russell makes his case for and against him every time he plays. There are things that other people just cannot do that he does, and there are mistakes that he makes.
Well, look back to that Champions Cup final.
Exactly.
There are, when he makes a mistake, it's an absolute howler, and will probably cost his team. But on the flip side of that, some of the things he does are magical to watch. And so I think a team like Scotland need an element of that to really drive them forward.
Well, Scotland are never, in my opinion, never going to be a team that can win attritional things. They're going to have to play on the edge, and that will include that. And yes, it may mean they can't mount a challenge for a World Cup because somewhere along the line they'll have a flaw in them, but they'll get a lot further and they'll enjoy themselves, and the spectators will enjoy watching them a lot more if they go down that route rather than any other route, because I don't think any other route is going to prove profitable either.
I think there's an argument really to have Hastings and Finn Russell in the same team. I think if they have two ball players with a brilliant understanding of the game, they've got some dynamic runners, they've got strike runners, they've got players like Hamish Watson that can balance them as well. Yeah, and when Hogg comes back into that fray, I think with two ball players it creates far more options for them that can allow those runners to get in there. I think Finn Russell on his own is probably leaves too much on his shoulders as an individual.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Everyone's ambitions are different. You can climb to the top, or you could take on uphill battles of a different kind. You can explore for hundreds of miles, or you could begin a bigger journey. You can make time fly, or you could make it stand still. The Mitsubishi SUV range. Drive your ambition.
Let's now go into partnership with England Rugby, Mitsubishi Motors, and their volunteer recognition programme, which provides the rugby community with opportunities to recognise and reward the volunteers who are the heartbeat of our game. Now, in normal times, thousands of volunteers across the country give their time up each week to support the game we know and love. Without their dedication, energy and commitment to rugby would simply not happen. However, look, when COVID-19 hit, many of these selfless individuals turned their attention to matters away from rugby, helping their local communities and vital services fight through the pandemic. In association with Mitsubishi Motors, the Full Contact podcast will be talking to a selection of these volunteers to hear their stories and shine a light on the brilliant work they've done during these most challenging of times. First, we want to speak to Nick Winwood of Letchworth Garden City, who is one of these such volunteers. Hello, Nick. I think, have we met before?
We have indeed.
We'll go into that later on, the circumstances. I don't want to give this away, circumstances of that. Yes, we have, yeah. Look, how long have you been involved with Letchworth?
I've been at Letchworth since '96. A previous club I played for folded, and they were my hometown club, so it was a no-brainer, really.
Mm. And how did you contribute to the club before, during, and during the lockdown?
Well, before I'd sort of slipped into the volunteer role of coaching. So I've been coaching a mixed ability rugby side, which is such great fun. Yeah. And I'm now coaching the Colts side, which I've continued through since I was sort of under 15s. And sort of an inaugural ladies side, which I've now been asked to get involved in the coaching of. So that was all starting to happen as we went into lockdown. Huge disappointment for my younger lads who'd reached a cup final, but unfortunately missed out on that opportunity to play that. But that sort of led us into lockdown, and within the lockdown period, we as a club, like many clubs across the country, have just embraced the need of the community. So what needs to be done, we put numbers up to do it. And that works extremely well, certainly in our community, because there are so many people involved with the club that are also involved in volunteering in other areas of the community as well. So it just sort of overlaps, and it's been a good resource, I think, for everyone in the area.
Nick, look, you talk about the reaction of the club to the lockdown and helping in other areas, but how difficult or how have you looked to try and maintain the club and its morale? Because it's really difficult when something of this importance is shut down.
Well, that's been massive, and I think it's opened or expanded certain areas that we were starting to look at within the world of rugby anyway, which is about the mental health of players. Certainly with the teenagers that I was involved with, I got several phone calls from parents saying, "Can you give my son a call? He's just locking himself away in his room. I don't know what to do with him." Those sort of things have come into play, which we've never experienced as volunteer coaches before and volunteers in clubs at that level. But it just meant that as we were on the right pathway, we were able to sort of embrace it, pick it up and run with it. And then as soon as we were able to actually get small groups together to actually start running around outside and letting some of these young men meet their friends again, run around, get out of breath, experience the fresh air. And yes, okay, they went back into their family units, and we followed all the regulations. But it was the right thing to do, and it's helped them no end move on.
I've seen this with my girls who have been at school, have been distance learning, have now gone back to playing rugby, and so on. It's been an absolute blessing for them. I think they didn't quite understand how much it gave them. Now, how when the return to rugby's not been straightforward. You can't do exactly what you were doing before. How have you managed to handle that at Letchworth?
We've looked at what the regulations have been. We certainly separated out training nights. So whereas there used to be a regular, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday training nights, and nobody else trained on any other times apart from a Sunday. But we started training on Monday nights, Friday nights, just to create the space so that people had the right safe environment to do things with. But we followed it to the letter, really, and we made it a real clear direction to not only the players but their families, that they have a responsibility in this too, that we're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it, but you have to buy into it as well. And we got that. And then as we've progressed right the way through, our club has now turned into certainly on a Sunday, complete one-way system, which includes the clubhouse and outside. So you enter the playing surfaces down one route, and then you clear the playing area for the next group to come on, being respectful about all of that, and then you leave through the exit area, which when you look at it over 4 or 5 playing fields, that's quite an achievement to make that happen. But people have respected that, and it's worked.
It is quite an achievement, but actually it works well, doesn't it? When they all do it properly, they all get out of the way quickly without messing around, which is quite nice. Like a bonus question. I know that you were one of 3 lucky people who were sent to Japan last year as part of the Mitsubishi Rugby volunteer programme for the final. And I remember, because for people who don't know, Mitsubishi had 3 people there who thought they were competing for one place. As it turned out, they were all sent, which is very generous. And the look on everyone's faces when they were told the one was great. You were one of those people. What was it like?
Well, that was one of the best stitch-ups I think I've ever come across. And that, I'll hold my hand up. Yeah, hook, line and sinker, superb. In the best traditions of the rugby world, we were sucker punched. It came from left field. I felt privileged just to have been shortlisted. And then to actually get the opportunity to go was just mind-blowing. It was a whirlwind of a trip. We were extremely well looked after by England Rugby and from Mitsubishi. And we can never thank them enough for that. Yes, we managed to go and see the final. Unfortunately, the result didn't go our way. But as in the rugby world, we made lots of friends on that day. But then the highlights of the trip really started to kick in, because the following day we went out into the grassroots of the game out in Japan. We got involved in coaching youngsters from as young as 6 and 7, right the way up to 17-year-olds playing their representative rugby, with visits along to some university rugby settings along the way. And the icing on the cake from that particular day, which I think probably was the best day of the whole trip, was we got involved in a small town who had put on a fete to raise money for damage caused to their town by the typhoon. Mm-hmm. So, we were taken along by our guide, introduced us to some of the local rugby lads who'd put on come and hit the tackle bag, come and get lifted in the line out. For a few pennies, we'll lift you and take your picture and that sort of thing. And we just got ourselves involved in that. And it felt very much being part of the community there, and actually giving something back to this town that had suffered so much hardship and damage in recent days. So to bring those sort of memories away, it's stuff that you can't buy, and it really touches the heart.
Well, Nick, thank you. Thank you for all your service. It was recognised. Thank you for coming on the show. Just keep doing what you're doing, because without you and the likes of you, rugby, simply would not exist as we know it. Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks, Brian. You keep up your good work too.
Well, for more details about the Mitsubishi Motors Volunteer Recognition Programme with England Rugby, you can visit www.englandrugby.com/participation/volunteers. A couple of questions from listeners. From Andrew, had Wasps not had issues with COVID to some key players in the build-up to the Prem final, how different could it have gone? Well,
I think they still got themselves in with a chance, didn't they? They had a line out. They had an opportunity.
Last bit.
I mean, I would flip that on its head and say, had COVID not happened, would Wasps have been in the final?
that is an interesting point. Yeah.
So there's 2 ways of looking at how COVID has affected Wasps. I think Wasps will be disappointed with the way that went. But look, I think they got themselves back from a pretty big hole where they were in early start of 2020, and I think they did fantastically well to get there, given some of the other teams that were knocking around.
Final one from Alistair Wise. ITV Six Nations coverage features female studio analysts and commentators, much to the benefit of the viewing experience. Is it time that other networks followed this example? Well, I think they are doing. Quite rightly so. I have no problem at all, as long as they're good, which they are, by the way. People like Maggie Alfonsi, absolutely no problem at all.
No, I completely agree. There was I saw some stuff on social media over the last couple of days, some pretty horrendous and very disrespectful comments about some of the ladies that have been working on the games. And look, they provide balanced opinion. They've got good opinions. They've had great rugby experience, and why can't they provide that opinion?
And if it's a question of you getting used to a female voice, then you have to get used to a female voice, because that's the future.
Everyone does at home.
Tell you what, come and live with me with 5 females for a day and you'll soon get used to it. That's all we've got time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. Thank you very much to my co-host Tom May and to all our guests. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and check out some of our previous episodes. To stay up to date on all things sport, head to telegraph.co.uk/contact, where listeners can get 30 days access to all Telegraph's premium sports coverage completely free. I'll be out next week to review the final round of the longest Six Nations in history, and I'll be here throughout the Autumn International Series. So for now, it's goodbye.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Drive your ambition.